You noticed something today that nobody else did. Maybe it was a shift in someone's tone, a pause that lasted a second too long, a smile that didn't quite reach their eyes. And while everyone else moved on, you stayed there, frozen, turning it over and over in your mind like a stone you can't put down. You do this a lot, don't you? You think deeply, constantly about everything. And most days it feels less like a gift and more like a punishment you never asked for. This one is for you. Imagine this. It's a regular Tuesday. You're sitting with a group of people, friends, coworkers, family, doesn't matter. Someone makes a joke, everyone laughs, but you're not laughing, not because it wasn't funny, but because in the 3 seconds it took everyone else to laugh and move on, your mind went somewhere else entirely. You started thinking about why that joke was funny, what it says about the group dynamic, whether someone in the room might have been quietly hurt by it and just didn't show it. And then almost involuntarily you started thinking about yourself, about how you always do this, about how exhausting it must be to be you. By the time you come back to the conversation, it's moved on. 3 topics ahead, and you're sitting there nodding along, pretending you were present the whole time, but you weren't. You were somewhere inside yourself in that deep, quiet, slightly painful place where you seem to spend most of your life. Nobody notices, nobody ever notices. And somehow that's the loneliest part. Here's something worth understanding about the way your mind works. Most people process the world on the surface. Something happens, they react, they move on. Their thoughts are like flat stones skipping across water, quick, efficient, unbothered, but your thoughts don't skip, they sink all the way down to the bottom of things, and once they're down there they start asking questions, hard questions, questions that don't have clean answers. Psychologists call this trait cognitive depth. It's connected to what researchers describe as being a highly sensitive person or having a deeply reflective mind. It means your brain processes information more thoroughly than average. It picks up on subtleties, patterns, undercurrents, things that exist beneath the surface of what's being said or done. You're not imagining things, you're just seeing more of them. And here's where it starts to hurt. When you see more, you feel more. When you feel more, you carry more. And nobody around you quite understands why you can't just let things go, why you need to talk about something for longer than feels comfortable, why you seem so affected by things that other people shrug off in seconds. They say things like you're overthinking it, or just relax, or why do you always make everything so complicated? And the worst part of you starts to believe them. There's a particular kind of loneliness that deep thinkers experience, and it's not the loneliness of being alone. It's the loneliness of being in a room full of people and realizing quietly that the conversation everyone else is having is happening at a level that doesn't quite reach you. You can participate, you're good at participating. You've learned to perform the right level of depth, to not go too far, to pull back when you see someone's eyes start to glaze over. But inside, there's always more. There's always a layer underneath the layer you just shared, and you keep it there, safe, unexpressed. Because experience has taught you that not everyone can hold what you're carrying, and so you become fluent in 2 languages, the one you speak out loud, and the one that lives entirely inside your head. That second language is rich. It's beautiful, actually. It's where your best ideas live. Your most honest feelings, your most precise understanding of the world, but it's also where your darkest fears live, your most obsessive loops, the thoughts that circle back at 2 a.m. when you're trying to sleep, the conversations you replay, the words you should have said, the things someone said to you 3 years ago that still live in your chest like a small, persistent ache. This is the painful side of thinking too deeply, not just the thinking itself, but what the thinking costs you. Think about someone like Maya, 26 years old, successful by most measures, has friends, a career she worked hard for, a life that looks fine from the outside. But Maya cannot watch a movie without analyzing the subtext of every character's motivation. She cannot have an argument without spending the next 48 hours dissecting every word she said and every word that was said to her. She cannot receive a compliment without quietly wondering what the person really meant, or whether they'd feel the same way if they truly knew her. Maya is exhausting herself, not because she's broken, but because her mind runs at a frequency that the world wasn't quite designed for. Or think about someone like Daniel, 32. Quiet in groups but electric in one-on-one conversations. People who get close to him say he's one of the most interesting people they've ever met, but Daniel has spent most of his adult life feeling fundamentally out of place. He struggles in small talk. He goes too deep too fast and watches people take a half step back. He's been told he's intense so many times that he started introducing himself with an apology built into his personality, a kind of preemptive dimming of himself so other people feel more comfortable. Daniel thinks about that deeply, what it means, what it costs, and the thinking doesn't give him relief, it just gives him more to think about. Here is the thing nobody tells you about having a deep mind. It doesn't come with an off switch. You can't decide to think less. You can't choose to care less. You can't simply stop noticing the things you notice or feeling the weight of the things you feel. Telling a deep thinker to stop overthinking is like telling someone with perfect pitch to stop hearing the notes. The sensitivity is structural. It's not a habit. It's not a flaw. It's the architecture of who you are. But here's where I want you to pause for a moment, really pause, because I think there's something you've been telling yourself that isn't entirely true. You've been treating your depth like a burden, like something to apologize for, like a thing that makes connection harder, life heavier, and everything more complicated than it needs to be. And yes, some of that is real. The weight is real, the exhaustion is real, the loneliness is real. But the story you're telling yourself that something is wrong with you, that you're too much, that you'd be better off if you could just think less, that story is costing you something far more important than the thinking ever could. It's costing you the ability to recognize what your depth actually is. Your depth is why you're the person people call when their life falls apart. Not because you have easy answers, but because you actually sit with them in it. You don't rush to fix, you don't flinch at the hard parts. You can hold complexity without needing to collapse it into something simpler. That is rare, that is not nothing. Your depth is why you create things, if you create, that actually move people. Why the things you write or build or say have a texture to them that most things don't. Because they come from somewhere real, somewhere most people never go. Your depth is why when something is beautiful, it's almost unbearably beautiful to you. A piece of music, a conversation, a moment of genuine human connection. You feel it differently, more completely, in a way that leaves a mark. The sensitivity that makes you hurt more also makes you love more. The same instrument, both songs. But I also want to say something that most people in this space won't say because it's uncomfortable. Sometimes your deep thinking isn't insight. Sometimes it's avoidance wearing the mask of wisdom. Sometimes the reason you're still turning that thing over in your mind, the thing someone said, the relationship that ended, the decision you made 5 years ago, isn't because you need to understand it better. It's because understanding feels safer than accepting. As long as you're still thinking about it, it still feels like you have some control over it. Like if you just find the right frame, the right interpretation, the right angle, the pain will finally make sense and therefore finally end. It doesn't work that way, and some part of you already knows that. The mind that can see everything has a particular blind spot, itself in motion, thinking its way around the very thing it needs to walk through. Pause here, sit with that for a second. Is there something you've been thinking about for months that you've been calling processing, but is actually something else? This is the realization that changes things, not immediately, not painlessly, but fundamentally. Thinking deeply is not the problem. The problem is when thinking becomes a substitute for living, when analysis becomes a way to stay at a safe distance from your own experience, when understanding becomes more important than being present for the moment you're actually in. You were given a deep mind. That means you will always see more than others. You will always feel more than others. You will always carry more than others. That is not going to change, and it was never supposed to, but you don't have to live entirely inside that depth. You're allowed to surface. You're allowed to be in a moment without immediately translating it into meaning. You're allowed to laugh at something without analyzing why it's funny. You're allowed to let some things be simple, even knowing they aren't. The goal isn't to think less. It's to choose, sometimes, to just be, even if just for a moment. Even if your mind immediately starts cataloging the experience of choosing to be. The painful side of thinking too deeply is real, but it is not the whole story. You are not broken, you are not too much. You are not a burden for seeing the world the way you see it. You are someone whose inner life is extraordinarily vivid, and that means both the beauty and the pain come in larger quantities than most people ever experience. And if you've spent years making yourself smaller so others feel more comfortable, dimming the frequency of your own mind to match the room, I want you to hear this clearly. The world doesn't need you to think less. It needs you to stop apologizing for thinking at all. You are not the problem you've been trying to solve.